Welcome back, everyone. So before I continue on with the anti-natalist and nihilists arguments, Chick Micken has been leaving me a lot of sort of Gish Gallop arguments. I think it's funny. There was a YouTuber I saw that said that the Gish Gallop was a fallacy. It's actually not a fallacy, it's a strategy. To my understanding, it's not an informal or formal fallacy. It's just a strategy where you try to overwhelm the opponent with so much information all at once, it's almost impossible to try and tackle all the issues in one foul swoop. You can't do it. You can probably attack one issue or a few, but you just won't be able to. I suppose I've been guilty of that, doing Gish Gallop as well. I think everybody's done it at least a few times or something. But Mr. Chick Micken has been bringing up all this stuff that is now, he is self-proclaimed. So Chick Micken, correct me if I am wrong. You self-proclaimed yourself as an ethno-nationalist. You reject the title white supremacist. You reject the title National Socialist. You reject the title white nationalist, maybe. But you definitely subscribed yourself, self-identified to me as an ethno-nationalist quite a while ago. Let me know if your mind has changed. You're very Christian in your ways, and I think a lot of the ideas that you perpetuate come from the Christianity mythos. It is mythology from my perspective, I'm sorry to say, but I think you know that, and I think you're very, very well aware. Now, some of the things that have been projected that have been argued, for one, and I've demonstrated this before, that this is a false narrative. This is basically cherry picking to create a confirmation bias. So you showed me this woman. She's clearly very prejudiced and very, very slanted and biased towards white people. I'm not a big... She keeps making these comparisons by saying, like she brought up the George Floyd incident, and she says, well, he did drugs in the past. He has priors for doing drugs. He has priors, I think there was sort of an potential aggravated assault. He didn't actually assault anybody, but he had a knife and he was prepared to threaten, but, the police have tasers and guns and stuff, so he didn't. And she said, it says this, therefore, because he has done things in the past, he could not possibly be innocent today. That's bullshit. I flat out reject that. That's just like somebody who says they used to be a bigoted, prejudiced racist, and they are no longer. You are not leaving the ability open for one to redeem themselves. And I think that's just a false narrative. I think that's just bullshit. I mean, people do change. People, they not only change their mind, but their life goes in different directions. They come up with new ideas, new philosophies that they may think are better than what they were doing before. So I don't know that you can look at a person's past and say, aha, they must be bad because they did this in the past. I am not a big fan, and I'm not a fan when the left does it either, the whole retroactive accountability. I'm not I'm not a big fan of that. And I think it's interesting because, like, Family Guy is a very left-leaning show, I think. And they sort of brought that up where Brian was like, hey, I'm the real McCoy. I'm the real liberal. I actually fucked someone who was trans. And this whole Twitter mob was after him and everything, saying that he was bigoted, homophobic, and racist and all this sort of stuff. And that's kind of the way that I view it. But enough with the SJW, anti-SJW stuff. I'm not that's like history now in internet years. We're not doing that anymore. But I'm not a big fan that she did that. That's crap. That's what the whole SJWs, that's what they did. That's what they do. You know, like, oh my god, he did blackface back in the fucking 70s or 80s. You know, he must be racist, you know, fucking 30 years later. Come on. And the fact is that those type of people get fascists wrong so much that when Richard Spencer came out and people were saying this was a legitimate fucking white supremacist, everybody was like, yeah, but you say that about everyone. It was the boy who cried wolf type situation. And it's the same with my friend, Lothier Mordred, the Gothic Republican. So many of those types of leftists think that he is a fascist. And he's not. They get it wrong more often than they get it right. So then when they do actually get it right, nobody believes them. So, I don't think it's... I'm not a fan of this whole retroactive accountability. The points and references in history, they're not applicable today. We can't hold people morally accountable to our standards today of people who existed, even just 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And that's the thing about your cabal of people, these religious people that come up with some of this weird stuff, this sort of weird conspiracy theories. It's almost like you walked out from 150 years ago into modern times completely unaware of all the social changes that have taken effect. I don't think you see it that way, but sometimes that's kind of how I see it. You know, if like I had a National Socialist tell me once that my presence, if a kid sees it, it could, and it's funny that he's aware of this, could activate the epigenetics. No, it won't. No, it won't. We have lots of evidence of gay couples raising a child, raise a child their whole life, and grow up straight. Look, like, the homosexual population is 10%. It's not a large population. It's small. All right, so that's 1 out of every 10. So you have a higher probability of having a heterosexual than a homosexual. That's just reality. So no, I'm not buying that narrative. That's crap. It's not a learned behavior. There is no evidence to support that until a straight guy, a heterosexual guy who has never sucked a dick in his life and enjoyed it, who has never had a homosexual thought in their whole life, suddenly does. And even then, I wouldn't say that makes him a homosexual. And then, if that did happen, that would only be one example out of countless that are counter to that. It's just, no, it doesn't make sense. But Okay, so I think I've well established I'm not a fan of retroactive accountability. It's bullshit. It's crap. I don't know how anyone thinks that that is a rational thing to do. It's not. So then the other thing that she does is look at black people doing violence. Here's an example. Here's an example. Here's an example. Here's an example. And then I pointed out to Mr. Chickmakin, this is an interesting fact. If the police find themselves in the midst of a serial killer, did you know that they were 98, 99% looking for a white person? The fact of the matter is serial killers are 99% of the time white. Not black, not any other race. They're not serial, like, it's very rare that you encounter somebody who's a serial killer that is not white. At least here in the United States. Now, if you go over to Africa that is predominantly black, they probably have serial killers of their own. But here in the United States, it's 99% of the time it's a white person committing a serial killer crime. White people do that. Okay, so like what she did is she focused on all the crime rates revolving around black people, and almost none of the crime rates surrounding white people. But she did do something interesting. She started talking about how white people are the victims, which illustrates the point that I've been trying to say, where it's not a racial issue. It's really an issue of, if you grow up in poverty, you are more likely to have bad education, to have mental illnesses, and you are more likely to commit crimes. And so therefore, because of this very strong correlation that we've seen over the years, the police are more likely to fuck with you if you live in poverty. And I have a feeling it has very little to do with race. So is the Black Lives Matter narrative that police are bad, boo. And then you have this alt-right sort of narrative that they're bullying white people, the police are bad, boo. That's extra funny because they agree that the police need to be reformed because they're targeting innocent people. Huh. Isn't that something? These weird, like, sort of white identitarians think the police need to, like, the police are harming innocent people, or people who are doing very remedial crimes, and Black Lives Matter is saying the exact same thing. So maybe this isn't about race. Maybe the police just need to stop killing innocent people, or hurting them, or firing on them just because they're smoking a joint. I did see that video. I did see that little snippet that the police opened fire on a kid for smoking marijuana. But I do have to say, I do think the police officer was justified in that, because the kid almost ran over him with a fucking car. So that kind of makes sense to me, that, you know, if a moving vehicle is traveling at you and could crush your feet and kill you, to open fire to try and get that to stop. Now, you brought up, like, Chickmakin brought up a lot of conspiracy theories, such as Zog. That seems to be a big one, that there's this secret cabal of Jewish people trying to eradicate the white race, or something like that. That all these big multi-conglomerate corporations that basically run our fucking government, and even in Mendham brought that up, is that, you know, Google is in charge of controlling the narrative on the net. And he said that should bother you. Regardless if you're on the left or the right, that should bother you. And absolutely it does. But the list of people that is mentioned, Chick Micken, is a very secularist group of people. They are not like, I mean, what the fuck is his name? The guy that owns Amazon. He's not Jewish. What is his name? Jeff Bezos? He's not Jewish. He's not. A lot of the people that you mentioned, some of them are atheists. Some of them are Muslims. Some of them are Jewish. Some of them, actually, Jeff Bezos comes from a more National Socialist background. That's kind of more on your fucking aisle. But I get the point. Yeah, I wouldn't argue with you that these. I don't think it's a Jewish conspiracy. I just think it's people who are rich and powerful abuse their power, and I think it's just as simple as that. I don't read too far into it. I don't think they're that fucking intelligent. At the end of the day, we're nothing more than human people monkeys that are basically flinging shit at each other, and we like to play with our genitals. I'm not going to give them that kind of credit. I mean, like, the real monster, the Rockefellers, they're not fucking Jewish. Like, they would be on your side. Do you not understand that? The Rockefellers have been engaged in what many people on the left would consider very rotten, dirty behavior. For a long time, they've been doing this. It stays in the family somehow. I don't get it, but now I don't say this often because it's mean, but to me, many aspects of those who believe in religion, I would almost say that they belong in the DSM-5 as suffering from delusions of grandeur. And I'm going to use Metasage's definition or terminology because I really like what he did, because it demonizes, it sort of creates a condemnation and offers sort of a zero tolerance approach to this. But to me, religion and conspiracy brain syndrome both belong in the DSM-5. To me, it's like looking at somebody who suffers from delusions of grandeur, or paranoid delusions, or daylight hallucinations. Now, you do have those religious folks that, they're not talking to God. They don't believe in this sort of sophistry of that the Jewish people are trying to take over the world, or the Muslims are out to get me, kind of thing. And they generally tend, for the most part, to be pretty rational people. And I think that their basis in religious belief is more allocated to fear of the unknown, which would be death. So I don't know if I would necessarily put them in the same category, but the reason why it's not looked as hate, because when you criticize Jewish people, they call it hate, because it's hate. And it's ridiculous. There is no secret cabal of Jewish people trying to take over the globe and eradicate the white race. And it seems to me that Jewish people look pretty white to me. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, but I don't really care about race. It's irrelevant to me. That's purely aesthetic. It doesn't matter. But there's no secret cabal of Jewish people doing this. I mean, with today's technology and the internet being available and all the hackers and craziness out there, surely somebody would have leaked this somewhere to where it would be more substantial evidence than what has been brought to the table, which is just circumstantial nonsense, really. There is no objective evidence saying, yes, this is a thing that is happening. Now, I would say that the reason why the birth rate in the white population is less than some of the others is because white people sort of, here in the United States, let me put it that way, sort of looking at like the upper and the middle class, it seems that white people generally don't reproduce unless they are in a financially stable position to do so most of the time. And that's something that has been taught through generations. Now, granted, not all white people do that. There is such a thing called what we call white trash. They generally don't seem to care if they are able to be fiscally responsible for their offspring and do it anyway. And I think that your group of people try to make the proclamation that everyone of a different ethnicity participates in the same kind of practices that white trash does. And I could find examples to show you that that is not the case. I'm not going to go into that, though. I'm just going to address what's on the table and try to be as quick as I can about it. So, yeah, the DSM-5. That's my true opinion of religion. It's like having a mental illness. But when I criticize something like Judaism, they don't call it hate. Because, like, schizophrenia is in the DSM-5. I don't hate people with schizophrenia. I don't want to lock them up in a padded room or lock them up in a cell or destroy them. I want to help them find ways to cope with their delusions of grandeur, to try and interact with the world in a way that makes more sense. And it's the same thing with people who are theists or people who try to... Hold on. Or people who try to... Not try, but people who follow along the lines of conspiracy theories. I'm offering you the counter position to these, which is honestly pretty easy most of the time, because a lot of it's pretty ridiculous. Now, I did find something interesting in the Red Elephants video that you showed me. It sounded to me from listening to them talk that the big problem they truly had was that they don't feel represented by the government. They think that both the right and the left have switched only to progressive politics or liberal politics of granting minorities equality, and now you yourselves feel without equality as the very, very, almost very literal interpretations of the Bible when you start talking about things like the Tower of Babel and stuff like that, that you feel unrepresented as a white, very, very strict, Orthodox, Christian, very literal interpretation of the Bible. And that may be true. You may be very underrepresented. That your way of life is not as popular as it once was, and now you seek political representation at Capitol Hill. And I find that interesting. I don't know that there's anything wrong with that. But I can tell you this. I think the majority of America does not want to go back to any kind of segregation or really old, weird political philosophies that women shouldn't vote, gay people should be put to death or put in jail, sodomy should be illegal. I don't know that anyone wants to really go back to that. So I don't know what your group or your representation wants to do. It sounds to me, I think a lot of people don't want that because they don't want the suppression and oppression you would advocate for. You're talking about stripping away a lot of people's freedom. And that's one of the great things about this country, is that we are able to be free. That, like homosexuality is not a crime. That being trans is not a crime. That secularism is here, that you can be an atheist, an anti-theist, a nihilist. You could be Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist. You could be Jewish. You could be Christian. You could be one of those Scientology freaks. You could even be one of those Mormon freaks if you wanted to. That's the beauty of this country, is freedom. And I would advocate for yours, even though you preach a lot of hatred. But see, that's the difference, is that I suppose I come from a position of tolerating theism, but I don't hate the people in it. I attack the idea, which is the religion. I don't attack the people. Now, granted, there are extremists in any group, and they do propose an actual threat. And I think every person has the right to defend themselves, especially when their life is on the line. But, you have a group of white supremacists or white nationalists, whatever, that got radicalized on the internet, and they ended up shooting a 19-year-old Jewish kid from a mosque who was gay. And it's like, do you really think this 19-year-old Jewish kid was part of this secret cabal of Jewish people that are trying to undermine the white race and take over the United States and make it so that none of this makes any sense? And I think that is not a narrative that I buy into. Now, when you bring up these rich elites, yes, the rich elites are a problem because they're establishing an aristocracy oligarchy. And that is a problem. That is a form of dictatorship. And this country is founded upon the principles of liberalism, anti-authoritarianism, not dictatorships. Dictatorships are antithetical to the American way of life, to the American philosophy, political philosophy. This is why, dogmatic nationalism was not supported by the founding fathers. One of our founding fathers even said, it is not your right or privilege to criticize, but it is your duty as an American citizen to constantly question your government. One of our founding fathers said that. The people you keep quoting as being these evangelical Christian people like yourself, they weren't. And I think it's funny that many people, especially the National Socialists, they want to go back to this Christianic way of life, that it's white Christian, that is the original format of white people. And it's not. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are the three Abrahamic religions, are Middle Eastern religions. The original religions of white people was paganism. There are very specific forms of pagan beliefs that are the original religion of white people, not Christianity. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, they're all tied into one little bundle. They're the same fucking thing. Islam has a different prophet. Instead of Jesus, it's Muhammad. The Old Testament is still there. And then you have the Jewish people, which is nothing but basically the Old Testament. So, come on. And it would be interesting if people listened to the words of Jesus Christ more, but they don't. And I would like to say that Jesus Christ said, he did say a lot of very positive things, but the New Testament has its fair share of bullshit, fuckery, and asinine things in it as well. So, what else was there? Yeah, so I think that's probably why they're censoring these sort of alt-right, whatever label from the alt-right you want to take. Ethno-nationalism, white nationalist, national socialist, neo-Nazi, KKK, any of that crap. Anything along those lines that advocates prejudice, bias, and bigotry. The reason why they're attacking is because these social media platforms, which would include Twitter, Facebook, Gab, YouTube, they have had a problem of white people, who predominantly white males, that have been ostracized in their normal social environment, and they get onto the internet, and part of the problem, I think, with the left trying to censor you guys is that you're not exposed to opposition. Like, I am this is why I don't censor you, is because I am a voice of opposition to you. You are a voice of opposition to me. If you are not allowed to exist within my space, then you will be pushed. Like, this is part of the problem. Yes, it is possible for you to change your mind. It is possible to say, you could even keep your Christian morality and your theology, if you will. But the whole racist sort of side of it, you might one day not feel that way. The sort of anti-gay stuff that you push, you may not feel that way one day. You may let that go. You may not. But you're certainly not going to let it go if you're pushed into a circle jerk echo chamber where everybody just compliments their own bad ideas. And that to me is a problem, because you're not being exposed to the voice of opposition. So I think if you started to notice that 90% of the crowd is not in line with your thinking and have some very, and everybody's going to have their own little argument to make. And many of them are going to be 10 times more rational than the arguments that you make. I think eventually you become more comfortable with that and understand, hey, these people don't think the same way I do, but, they're not bad people. And they have pretty rational arguments. And you're just as much as you're probably sitting there thinking you're not going to change my mind, you're not going to change. It works both ways, basically. So And I also like doing the debate thing, like that is what philosophy is, the art of debate. So trying to control someone's thoughts is not possible. All you can do is control, like through vicious authoritarianism, whether they express those thoughts or not. And that's part of the problem with like outlawing things like homosexuality, is what we've seen in the past, is that it didn't contain homosexuality. All it did was push them into the closet where they weren't vocal about it and they hid their identity. And that in itself created problems societally and started interacting with mainstream society. And ultimately, at some point, you have to ask yourself, does this crime have a victim? And the answer is no. It's a victimless crime. So why is it even illegal? Like, literally. It's victimless. And you could bring up, I know you would bring up the whole HIV thing. HIV is an STD. It's not in, just because you're a homosexual doesn't mean you're going to get it. I am going on 37 years old. I have not even had a single STD in my entire life. I've never even managed to catch crabs. And you can get that from a fucking toilet seat. So, no. That's not an inevitable outcome of being homosexual. It's not. It's not. Or maybe you think I'm one of the good ones. I don't know. I don't know how you think about this stuff. So, I think that's interesting that the alt-right is creating their own little political group, although it's not surprising, called the Red Elephants. Good for you. But this elite group is not a bunch of Jewish people. It's very secular. There's people of many different beliefs in it. The problem is that they have obtained so much monetary power that it is equated to political power. And now they're able to use lobbyists and stuff to create laws, legislations, and get through loopholes so that they don't have to be held accountable to the law, and there's blatant monopolies. And that is a very big problem. Now, if we were to go back to the original, like, sort of liberal sort of political philosophies, where you had the creation of, like labor laws, they've basically, over time, they found their way around those. And it's not good. It's not good, and I will agree with you on that fully, 100%. So, yeah. But the reason why they are trying to silence it's not you specifically. It's because there have been people, and part of the problem that they have been radicalized is because they've been ostracized and isolated. And they find darker parts of the internet. That's part of the problem, is that they're not, the triggered left isn't interacting with you the way the old school left used to, like myself, where we come in and we offer voice of opposition. And especially if we see somebody who looks like they're becoming radicalized, I think anyone should reach out to a person like that, because you're talking about destitution at that point. I mean, who knows what they're fucking capable of? This is why it said that they participate in lone wolf operations. It's not so much lone wolf operations as it is somebody who's been isolated and becomes radicalized and does something really, really horrendous. You don't have the right to take people's lives. No. That's where the line stops. But these social media platforms have been in hot water too many times because white supremacists have come out being highly radicalized and end up killing a bunch of people. That's the truth. And that's a smart business move. Because you don't want that to reflect on your company. No company would want to do that. That's just facts. So I think as long as you're not radical, and I feel this way about any radical, like radical jihadists don't need to be uploading snuff films on YouTube. That's inappropriate. They don't need to be killing the moderates in their countries. They don't need to be killing Americans. They don't need to be killing Christians and Jewish people. And the Jewish people need to stop picking fights. The radical Jewish people need to stop picking fights with the Muslims. And this is the point that I'm getting down to of why, to me, religion is like it's not helpful at all. Like you've got these three groups of religions that basically all, like, okay, there's the Christians, they have their bullshit, the Muslims, they have their bullshit, and then the Jewish people, they have their bullshit, and all of them seem to think that their religious ethos or mythology is a threat to one another. And it's like, how is that helpful? You guys are creating your own cabals out of your own imagination. You are literally fighting over something that cannot even be objectively defined. It's true. It cannot be objectively defined. God cannot be objectively defined, nor do I think we will ever have the evidence to objectively define what God is, or the relevancy, or the reason or purpose of life. We may not ever be able to objectively define that. So, when you see a group of people that are like, I believe this based on no evidence, just some book that was written, just like Scientology was, L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer. Okay, so that's the only evidence you can bring to the table is a book that's just basically fiction. And that's it. So you've got these three groups of people that believe in something off of no evidence. There's no evidence to support it other than the anecdotal stuff that happens in their mind. I heard the voice of God. Okay. And then they fight each other. And they fight over this idea that exists in their head. It's like watching two schizophrenics fight each other. Two people who suffer from delusions of grandeur saying, my delusion of grandeur is correct and yours isn't. See where I'm going with this? See the problem? This isn't helpful. This isn't helpful at all. This is just throwing more bullshit into the fire and making the fire even bigger than it needs to be. So if we want to say that these big conglomerate corporations are a problem, and they are currently, they are, saying that it's a secret cabal of Jewish people, It's just making the fire worse. It's not helpful. It's not. Recently, I saw a video by Jaclyn, and it totally reminded me of how you go and watch that video. I will leave a link to it in the description. Watch this young dude as he talks about Jesus and invoking the power of Christ. And I want you to know that that looks utterly insane to me. It's crazy. It's not loose. It's not lucid. It's like out there. It's not rational. It's not logical. It is a DSM-5 thing. And you look at it and you go, man, I really hope that he gets help. So that I've ran this video too long, so I'm sure I will hear from you, Chick Megan. I think it would be interesting at some point to have a live stream with you and actually do sort of talk about these ideas face to face, because doing it through messages and comments on YouTube is difficult. You haven't even so much as sent me an email. It's almost like you're afraid to do it. I don't know why. I've had other people that have debated me. They've found me on Facebook to have a more in-depth conversation. They've emailed me to have a more in-depth conversation. You only do it on YouTube, and you know the algorithm will just take it down. Because as I said, you talk about the day of the rope type stuff. And I mean, that's just hateful stuff. And like I said, the problem is they've had too many radicalized people come off of social media in general. This is not just YouTube. I won't doubt that if one comes from BitChute, it will be the next. And they'll start participating in censorship as well. And I think that's where censorship ends, is when it starts advocating towards violence. But I mean, that book that the day of the rope came from, it hasn't even been censored. But yet, songs about sex and, yeah, I mean, Marilyn Manson has faced a lot of backlash and pushback for censorship. A lot of goth bands have, a lot of, like what you would consider problematic to society have been censored by Christian groups. But the bigoted hatred that your group pushes is finally starting to see that, because a lot of catastrophes have happened from radicalized people. Brainwash is the name of the game. Brainwash is not humane. Brainwashing is how you get people into a cult to drink cyanide Kool-Aid. So, I know I will hear from you. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and opinions, but like I said, I think it would be interesting so that people could see a leftist stand in opposition to a very conservative, Christo-fascist position. You're interesting, Chick Megan. Very interesting. With that, though, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell button on any channel you're subscribed to, and I'm out.